and welcome to biology class. So, in our last discussion, we discussed a topic called digestive system. And in that class, I explained what digestion entails. I explained the processes that are involved in digestion. So we are making reference to what we discussed in the last class because they are important components of that topic that will also be mentioned, in this class. So it needs to be linked together. So in that class, I said that digestion is the breaking down of complex food materials in the body of an organism for their use, right? And in the process, I explained various enzymes that are also involved, right, in the digestive processes, right? So now, I explained also that if a complex food material is broken down in the body of an organism, right, that the essential materials that are needed for proper metabolic function in an organism will be absorbed in the bloodstream, right, for the proper functioning of such an organism. Now, what happens to the materials that are undigested? Those materials that are undigested, right, would have to leave the body of an organism, right? So if they don't leave the body of that organism, there will be a problem. So the process or the procedure through which materials that are undigested or materials that are not needed in the body of an organism, leaving the body of such an organism, is what we are discussing today. So on that note, our topic today is excretory system. And in discussing excretory system, we'll be discussing excretion. What is excretion? So when we mention the term excretory system, it involves various organs, right, that are responsible for ingestion or elimination of toxic metabolic waste in the body of an organism, right? Every organ, be it the liver, be it the kidney, be it the lungs, be it the kidney, every organs that are involved in removing toxic waste in the body is what we refer to as excretory system. If it is in plants, because plants is a good example of what? Of a living thing, right? Also, they don't have specialized organs that are responsible for removal of their waste in their body. However, they have waste products that also leave their body. So today we'll be discussing excretion. What is excretion? Excretion simply means is the removal of toxic metabolic waste from the body of an organism. So the removal of toxic metabolic waste from the body of an organism is what is referred to as what? As excretion. So if an organism carries out metabolism, right, where food materials or materials are broken down into simple form, right, and they get absorbed into the bloodstream, those undigested food materials would have to leave the body of an organism. So what exactly are the excretory products that needs to leave the body of an organism? One, we have carbon dioxide. In animals, we have urea, we have uric acid, and ammonia. And in plants, we have water, we have oxygen, we have carbon dioxide, and then they also have other excretory products or other waste products in their body that have to leave their body. And that is latex and resin. So we have latex, we have resin, we have gums. So these are products that have to leave the body of an organism. So what have I said so far? I've said the product or the waste metabolic product that would have to leave the body of an organism for proper functioning of such an organism is we have carbon dioxide, we have urea, we have uric acid, and we have ammonia. These are products that are not needed in the body of an organism, and as such, they would have to leave the body of such an organism. So, what exactly are the reasons why an organism must carry out excretion? 1. An organism must carry out, or a waste metabolic product will have to leave the body of an organism based on the following reasons. Number 1, if such materials, right, are left in the body of such an organism, right, it might lead to eventual death of such an organism because it is not healthy for an organism. So for an organism to continue to live or for an organism to continue to survive, the waste metabolic products would have to leave the body of such an organism. That is number 1. 2, for an organism to function maximally, right, there needs to be a balance of water in an organism. So to maintain the water balance in an organism, such an organism must carry out excretion. 3, for an organism to function maximally, there needs to be what is called homeostatic, balance also. That means there has to be there has to be a balancing of the osmotic content. There will be a salt content of an organism must be maintained, right? So if the salt content of an organism is not maintained, then there's a problem with there will be a problem in that organism, the body of that organism. So for an organism to function maximally, there needs to be a balance of salt content in the organism. That is another factor, right? So the other factor is an organism will have to get rid of excess toxic material in their body so that those materials will not interfere with the normal metabolic process. Because if a waste product in an organism is not ejected out of that an organism, right, it will interfere with the normal homeostatic, normal metabolic processes in that an organism. So these are the reasons why, those excretion will have to take place, or those unwanted materials will have to leave the body of an organism. Most of these metabolic products are toxic. So if they don't get ejected out of the body of an organism, there would be a problem. Now, before we proceed, it's pertinent for us to know the differences between egestion. I mentioned it in my last class, egestion, and egestion or elimination, and secretion. When we talk about egestion, right, egestion or elimination and secretion are not the same thing. So it is very important we note the difference between those two. When we talk about egestion simply means the removal of undigested food materials. A good example is once you finish eating your food and your food are digested, right? The undigested food materials or the materials in your body that are not needed will have to leave your body by through a process of egestion or elimination. That means coming through your body, leaving your body through the anus, right? That's when you use the toilet and you do that. But for secretion is very needed or is very essential for metabolic process in the body. For digestion of certain food to take place in your body, there's a need for secretion of certain hormones or certain enzymes in your body. So secretion is related to what? To secretion of enzymes, secretion of hormones, not egestion of enzymes or egestion. No. The only thing that can be ejected out of the body of an organism is what? Is undigested food material. So they are not the same thing. It's very important we note the difference. Also, remember that the opposite of egestion is what? Is ingestion. So ingestion means intake of food substances, to ingest, to take food substances, to take food, to take anything through the mouth is to ingest, right? Anything that leaves through the anus is what? Is ingestion, right? So ingestion deals with the process of what? Of digestion. Ingestions deals with the process of what? Of excretion. So these are the what? Are the differences, or this is the that's the difference between ingestion and ingestion, or ingestion, elimination, and secretion. It's very important we know the difference. So the next thing we'll talk about is we'll list certain organisms, some organisms. Then we'll talk about their digestive organs. So organism, then their digestive. So number one, we look at amoeba and paramecium. Number two, we look at flatworm. Three, we look at earthworm. Look at fish. Look at amphibians. Look at insects. Look at man. Look at plants. So for amoeba, what exactly is their digestive organ? What organ do they use for digestion? What they use is called contractile vacuole. For flatworm, the last class we discussed flatworm. I said flatworm can also be called the planaria. And what do they use for excretion is what? Flame cell. For earthworm use Malpighian tubules. Fish has kidney. Amphibian, the same thing. Kidney. We have lenticel for plants. So, let's talk about the contractile vacuole. For contractile vacuole in an organism, organism like amoeba or paramecium are simple unicellular organisms, right? So this simple unicellular organism lives in a moist, or it lives in a moist or in a water environment, right? So there's this surface area to volume ratio. That is, they have a direct contact with their immediate environment. So as such, there's a high tendency of water and food materials flowing directly into their body, right? Passing through the body's cell membrane or the cell surface into their contractile vacuole. The contractile vacuole is like a bag or a storage organ, as it's responsible for storing water. So it opens up and it allows materials to flow in through their into the body of amoeba. However, once the bag gets filled up, there's a need for the organism to maintain an osmotic balance, right? That is, there's a need for it to maintain a balance as an organism and with that of an environment. So once the organism gets filled up, what happens is the contractile vacuole, which is like a bag or vacuole, would have to start contracting. By the time it starts contracting, it ejects the food, the water content inside, right? Eject it into the cell membrane. The cell membrane is attached to the unit environment. Remember, I told you it lives in the water environment or in moist environment, and as such, it passes through the cell surface and then ejects into the environment or releases into the environment. So water flows into amoeba through osmosis, right? Because this is literally how they feed. This is how they survive. They live in a watery environment, and materials flow into them through their cell body or through their cell membrane, right? So once it enters inside, it passes through the cytoplasm deep down into the vacuole. So once the water gets into the vacuole, the vacuole will keep expanding because more water are flowing in. So once it has reached its capacity or in the limit, they need to maintain an osmotic balance. So as such, it will start contracting to release excess water that are inside. Release it into the cytoplasm, into the cell surface, then into the environment. So this is literally how these organisms, the simple unicellular organisms, carry out excretion. Then the next one we look out for is the flatworm or pyrrhia. The flatworm uses what is called flame cell. Flame cell to carry out excretion. So the flame cell is a part of the body or an organ that is responsible for injecting materials that are not needed in the body of a flatworm, right? So it has like what is called the proximal and beginning and the distal part of it, where it gets connected with materials are just absorbed from the part of the body. Any material that is not needed gets absorbed into the flame cell, and then from the flame cell gets ejected out of the body of flatworm. So the expression in flatworm is very simple. Remember when we were talking about digestion last time, I said that the excretory digestive organ or digestive tract in flatworm is a simple or a one-way digestive tract. That simply means that they only have one digestive tract. One digestive tract. That means the pathway through which food comes in is the same pathway through which food leaves their body, right? However, they have what is called flame cell that enable the absorption of water materials like water, like mineral salts in their body that are not needed and then get removed out of the body of such an organism. So the next thing we look out for is the fish. So the fish has kidney, just like human. So the kidney carry out important metabolic processes in the life of fish. Just the same way the human being also has kidney that carries out metabolic processes or that remove materials from the body of human beings. So fish carry out that also. So the kidney is responsible for absorption of water, absorption of minerals, so that absorption of oxygen, and then take them out of the body of a fish. Process it, they take it out of the body of a fish as a metabolic waste that are needed in the body of such an organism. This is going to ensure that there's an osmotic balance in the body and there's homeostatic balance in the body of such an organism. If these materials that are needed in the body of this organism are left there, it will lead to the eventual death of such an organism. So the next one we look at is amphibians, right? What are amphibians? Amphibians are literally organisms that can survive both on land and water. We have the roots as example of amphibians, we have salamander, example of amphibians, also we have plants and frogs as a good example of it, of amphibians. So for them, the
if you're emphasizing on plant use various parts of their body, their vocal cavity, their skin, whatnot, to carry out respiration. And however, we have kidney, and this kidney is used to carry out metabolic, to carry out excretion, level of metabolic products that are needed. What metabolic products that are needed in their body. So, just like human being, it does the same thing. It remove any materials that are needed in the body of an organism and inject it out of the body of such an organism. Then we have plants. For plants, we have
lenticel and stomata.
We have lenticel and stomata. The lenticel and stomata in plants
are not specialized
organ. Like as I mentioned earlier, that plant
does not have any specialized organ like
the way animal has specialized organs. So plants don't have any specialized organ that are responsible for removal of waste materials in their body. When you have the lenticel and the stomata is attached to the leaf, lenticel is attached to the what? To the stem. And what they do is they are responsible,
they opens up through various processes or procedure. When we start discussing
plant tissues, we'll talk extensively on that. The lenticel opens up and the stomata opens up to take in oxygen. To take in carbon dioxide. So the process of taking carbon dioxide that human beings breathe out, it releases oxygen as well. And at the same time, it also releases water. Meaning that there are various processes that are responsible for uptake of water from the soil, from the soil ground, the soil water up to the shoot of a plant, right? It involves transpirational flow, it involves osmosis, it involves diffusion, and those processes enables water to move from the root soil to the shoot of a plant. However, when you do this, it's very important that for that plant to also maintain a balance, this product will have to leave the excess water will have to leave
the body of an organism, right? So the opening of the leaf through the gut cell, right, enables water to leave the body of an organism. Also enable the intake of what? The carbon dioxide into
the body of plant. So those parts are opened up are responsible for what? For the release of these materials that will be excess in the body of plant. And these parts are named the lenticel and the stomata. So the next one we'll talk about is man. So we have a lot of excretory organ, not just the kidney. We have the kidney,
we have the liver, we have the skin,
the kidney, the liver,
the skin, and the lungs.
So, what's the lungs?
What are the products
that the lung releases to the environment? Of course, carbon dioxide,
right? Are the waste products, or
it's a waste product that it releases
into the environment because it's not needed.
At the same time,
for skin, we have sweat in form of water. We have mineral salts. And for liver, the liver releases what is called bile. So this bile can also be called bilirubin. So this bile or bilirubin is gotten from a destroyed red blood cell. We said red blood cell, we'll discuss that also when we start talking about transport system. Red blood cell only lasts for less than 3 months in the body of an organism, right?